The following program was recorded on May 29th, 2017. Welcome to the Robert Morningstar Show on the 100th anniversary of the birth of John F. Kennedy, whom we remember tonight as the central figure of the 20th century. So tonight's program is called The Kennedy Century, which in my estimation will actually begin tonight. And I'm very pleased to welcome as my guest and co-host tonight Scott Teeters, a long-standing friend and host of Far Out Radio. Kennedy has continually visited our broadcasts, and so we will have a retrospective tonight on the life of John F. Kennedy. It's not going to be about the assassination because the assassination distracts us from the really important part of the legacy of John F. Kennedy, which was really the life he lived and the legacy that he left to us. So I would like to welcome Scott, and perhaps you'd like to say a few words about the Kennedy century as you have lived it yourself.
Robert, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. You were on my Far Out Radio program many times. While you were talking, I'm looking up my playlist section. Let's see. I will find out how many times that you and I were on talking about the Kennedy experience, but lots and lots of really very, very interesting conversations. And you're right. I agree with you that the Kennedy assassination, the coup d'etat of President Kennedy was one of the most pivotal events, experiences in American history.
I think that goes for anyone and everyone who was alive that day, except for anyone in China. Red China did not announce it and paid no attention to it, which cast a little bit of suspicion on them to who was pulling strings. But as we know now, after 50 years of research, investigation, and recollection, we now have all the pieces in place. We have all the players in their positions. We have all the names. And we don't really need any more files because the American people, in their quest for justice and in their righteous might, as Franklin Roosevelt used to like to say, in their righteous might, they had dismantled the cover-up and exposed the mechanics, the planners, the engineers of the JFK assassination. And if you want more details on it, we spent a lot of time on it at UFO Digest, exposing the financial cabal, the political cabal, military intelligence cabal that engineered, orchestrated, and carried out the framing of a very heroic Central Intelligence agent named Lee Oswald, and used him as the scapegoat and the getaway vehicle along with Officer Tippit. But as I said, tonight, conversation is not about the assassination. It's about a man's life, which began on May 29th of 1917. It's a very significant year and a significant month for all Catholics. As you know, President Kennedy was the first Catholic president and the only Catholic president that we had. And he came into the world at a very critical point in geopolitics and in the application of religion for geopolitical ends. And in that, I'm referencing an event that happened the very month that John F. Kennedy was born, just 2 weeks before, in fact, the miracle of Fatima began. Because the miracle of Fatima was not a one-day event. It actually went on for about 6 months. And the culmination came in October of 1917, which was the miracle of the sun. And perhaps later on we'll do a show exclusively on the miracle of Fatima and what happened there. But this was in the air, and this was in the air the month that John F. Kennedy was born. And as you know, Rose Kennedy was an extremely devout and religious person, a devout Catholic. You know how Catholic the Kennedys are? Mm-hmm. They believe that there was a Kennedy in the Roman legion standing at the foot of the cross. And some of them believe that he was actually Cassius Longinus, Roman soldier who drove the spear into Christ's side so that his bones would not be broken.
So that's got something to do with the fact that John Kennedy often would quote Roman philosophers.
He was
steeped in the mystique of Roman philosophy and history.
And as well as many other forms. You know, one of the things that he was studying was Chinese philosophy. He wanted to understand the Chinese, so he went into Chinese studies as well. It's a very little known fact. And of course, that casts suspicion on him for having that kind of an interest in those years. I'd like to talk about, well, let me just say this. Let me give you some words, okay? Because these words are very important to me personally because they actually affected my life. They set me on a path. They made it possible for me to go to a very prestigious school, and I'll tell you how that was. But first, I'd like to echo these words for you. And the words are these. We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change. For I have sworn before you and Almighty God the same solemn oath our forebears prescribed nearly a century and 3/4 ago. The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. And yet the same revolutionary beliefs for which our forebears fought are still at issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. We dare not forget today that we are the heirs of that first revolution. Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty. This much we pledge and more.
I'd like to share with your listeners that one of the many reasons why I always enjoyed having you on Far Out Radio, and I just went through some archives here, and you and I did 41 programs together in about 3 years, is that you always come to the table with some just amazing factoids about things. Now, I did not know that the Fatima experience was in the same month that John Kennedy was born. Also, what happened just 2 months before Kennedy was born, a little less than 2 months before, the United States of America entered into World War I. It makes me wonder what else happened that had major impacts on the world that, you can't really connect the dots to oftentimes until you have some long-term perspective.
Exactly. That's the nature of history. History cannot be read as it happens. I remember in college in a history course, one of my students made an analogy. He said that history cannot be read at close range. You have to wait a while. But to try to read history in the moment is like taking a book and sticking it 2 inches from your eyes, where you can only see 1 word or 2 words at a time. Only by lengthening out the distance are you able to perceive the entire sentence. This is true. The 20th century is the most deadly century in human
Absolutely.
history. And the genocides spoken of in the 20th century, while most people just concentrate on one primarily, the genocides began in 1913 in Turkey with the Armenian genocide. Then there were the genocides of the communists against the kulaks and the displacement of people and the takeover of Russia and the slaying of the intelligentsia. And then in the 1930s, an even worse Holocaust than the Holocaust. It's called the Holodomor, that no one speaks about, which is the genocide of the Ukrainian population by the Soviets and the Soviet commissars who stole all of their food and actually killed 10 million people or more. So this is the world that John F. Kennedy came into, and was raised in a privileged position, privileged status. And President Kennedy suffered very severe fevers when he was young and made him very weak.
Hard to believe, because if you ever see pictures of him when he was in the Navy, my goodness, he was a scrawny guy.
He was scrawny. He was a good swimmer. He was in Harvard.
Lucky for him.
I have just published regarding the American people solving the mystery of the John F. Kennedy assassinations. Thousands upon thousands of dedicated investigators and researchers, each called up 1 or 2 facts amidst the mountain of lies and camouflage and deception, and have reconstructed the crime, and we have exposed the criminals. It is very gratifying to say that they couldn't fool Jim Garrison, and that everything that Jim Garrison said in that famous NBC broadcast of 1967 is true. The CIA, the World Banking Syndicate, orchestrated, engineered the murder of President Kennedy in order to force us into Vietnam.